it's really easy to come up with a million reasons why not to do something, or why we can't do something, or why we're not good enough to do something. But it takes one good reason to convince ourselves that we can. But we have to be our biggest advocate in that.
Hey, before we jump into today's episode, let's address a game changer for you. The business owners out there struggling to get noticed. You might be missing out on one of the most powerful tools in today's digital world. I'm talking about video content. Now, I know the thought might make you nervous. You're worried about what people might think, right? But imagine reaching those who need your services most, transforming their lives with what you have to offer. My friend, all you really need is a smartphone and the courage to share your message. And to help you break through the barriers, I've crafted the perfect starter kit just for you. It's my camera confidence checklist. But I didn't stop there. I've also created a step-by-step mini course that will not only boost your confidence, but will teach you how to create genuine connections with your audience. And here's the kicker. I'm giving you an exclusive video series on mastering your phone's camera. Learn to shoot, edit, and sound like a pro, and it's all for you for free. So my question, are you ready to stand out and attract more clients? All you simply have to do is click the link down below or go to zachpitts.com/checklist. Embrace the spotlight because confidence comes from competence. So let's make this your breakthrough moment. Now let's dive into this week's episode. Welcome back to the Zach Pitts Show. Great to have you here and great to have my next guest because you know what? We actually worked together for a time in the Living Dayton days. Welcome back, Grace Khatchaturian, into my life.
I've been well. Zach, it's so great to see you and to be here with you. This is exciting. This is so up your alley. So I'm not surprised, but I am really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be chatting with you. So we worked together on Living Dayton for a short time. I think it was probably about a year.
Yeah,
I believe when it was all said and done. I left. You stuck around for a little while. Then we worked together. I mean, not as closely. I was doing the morning news. You were doing Living Dayton, but then you left to do another similar style show, right?
Yes, that's right. In my hometown, Champaign, Illinois.
Champaign, Illinois. And how long did you do that?
About 2 years. So 2 years in Dayton, 2 years in Champaign and lifestyle shows. And then now I'm working for the University of Illinois, Chicago, and I am their podcast host. And basically, I'm taking a lot of their written content and turning it into multimedia. So whether that be podcast or just audio stories, so that's more accessible to people. So I'm using a lot of the same skills that I developed the last couple of years, but doing it in an academic setting, which has been really cool because we're kind of introducing the concept of kind of TV things that we love and we know well to a totally new setting. So it's been cool, but I needed a remote job. I got married.
Congratulations, by the way, which you met in Dayton, right?
Yes. Yeah. So he was with the Dayton Dragons at the time, which is what's wild. We met then, went on a date, and the rest is kind of history. But with the baseball life that I'm now figuring out, you kind of need a flexible schedule, which, TV is not exactly like pick up and go anytime type of thing. So this job lets me kind of do both what I love and have loved to do in TV in a way that lets me still see Jacob more than a couple times a year and kind of get to experience the season with him. So we're currently in Cincinnati right now, but we are leaving to Louisville here soon. And we just kind of bounce around all season. For last year, it was January until October. So this year, it's probably February until October. So still long season, but it's fun. The cool thing is I know nothing about baseball. I just go and I talk and I sit and I enjoy the game. But pretty much watch Jacob, eat snacks, and talk to other people. But that's pretty much it.
Smile and wave and do all those things.
Yes.
You hit on something really interesting, and I definitely want to talk about your book. Which is something you had mentioned that you always wanted to do, and we'll dive into it more. But I can't remember if you were in the middle of writing it when we worked together, or if that was just a goal that you had always had. But before we talk about that, you mentioned something that I find incredibly interesting. It's very similar to why I left the TV business. You're working for this, university. You have these fundamental principles and foundation, this really strong skill set when it comes to what TV has taught you.
Yes.
And as we go into this new world of digital media, if you're not putting out video content, in some cases, if you don't have your own show, if you don't have that ability to connect with people through screens, you're going to be a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And, you had that skill set, working in TV for a few years. What did when they approached you about that position, what were some of the things that they were struggling with that you said like, oh, I got this? And to you, it's second nature because you've done it. And before that, we didn't even touch on this. I mean, you did the whole Miss Illinois thing before. Mm-hmm. So you're very comfortable in front of people and knowing how to speak on camera. So what was that like, that conversation initially like?
Yes, it was interesting because I have a lot to learn still about working in higher education, but it is a very different setting. Whereas news, it's super fast paced, your deadline is daily, and also like the product you put out every single day starts over every single day. Whereas in a university setting, it's a very different timeline, but at the same time, they're kind of putting in the same amount of work, but it's going in one place and it's one dimensional. And so you're only getting so much bang for your buck. Whereas if we disseminated the work that they're already doing and made it into multimedia, whereas they have the written story, now let's make an audio version. Let's take that same guest and interview them like we would kind of on a lifestyle TV show, and then put exactly those pieces of content on social media. So we are just taking the same work they're already doing and making it into more pieces because you already have the biggest chunk of what you need to do, which is a story. So it's been really fun. And you're right, it has been extremely natural for me to come into this setting and evaluate what steps we need to go from here, because I'm not as familiar with their side of the written component, but I'm extremely familiar with what we should go and do from here. So we've taken and making things, we have a whole team. So I'm not in the video portion anymore. I'm primarily audio, which has been kind of interesting in itself, where I find myself kind of feeling like I'm in radio a little bit, which is kind of fun. But yeah, we take what's their product that they already have and we just create it into more things because they already have done the hard work, the heavy lifting of what it is. But the primary conversation was like, yes, how can we evolve with where consumers are going? Like, where are consumers going? We're looking at fast-paced, digital, a lot of TikTok, which we are hesitant to step into that realm, but we're getting there. And then, of course, podcasts are a huge thing right now, as you know.
Yeah, well, and that's the exact same thing I'm doing with this, right? This, as you put it, the hard work is just this, but I enjoy this. I love having the conversations, but then I can take this podcast, whether you're watching it, I can then extract the audio, upload it to a podcast. This entire thing will live on YouTube. Then I can take little pieces when you said something really cool and I can chop those up into little bits and put that on Instagram, TikTok, all the different platforms. I can get it transcribed, make it something that someone can read. So that is, if anybody gets anything from this episode, aside from the amazing things that Grace has to say, do more with one piece of content.
Yes.
And it's such a powerful, it's batch producing your content.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done.
I'm lucky that I now have like a team of people to help do exactly that. It's just which steps to take when. But for someone like you, where you're kind of doing it all yourself, it's incredibly impressive, but it is possible, which is so cool. And it is such an important part now of if you want consumers to be absorbing and engaging in what you're putting out, you do need it in every space that they're going. It doesn't do you any good to have it in one place that, like, blogs used to be the thing. Like have your own blog spot on, a website. That used to be all you needed. And now that is like, if you're there, you're only going to get so many. Like that'll die out quickly.
Quickly, if you don't mind me asking, obviously you got married, you wanted a remote job. That played an equation of you leaving TV. Was it also, I'm very curious of your response here, the trend that you see with TV, because in my opinion, it's a dying business. I mean, it's a fact. It's the newspaper. What happened to that? And you said go where consumers are.
Yeah.
They're all online. They're online. They're swiping.
They are. People have short attention spans. And I think that the platforms that are out there aren't helping the TV industry. Now, working with a few different stations and getting their take on how we evolve and keep up with the changes of how society is going, especially in the last station that I was at, that was the conversation constantly, is like, okay, how can we keep up with the changes? And we're doing faster segments, more content. People kind of like the oversaturation of content. Like, people get bored fast. To say I left TV because I felt like it was a dying business, I honestly don't think I considered that as much, because I simply loved it. Like, I love talking, I love talking to people. I love understanding someone's story. And I really could and still could see myself in TV long term. I knew in this season of my life it wasn't going to work because of the flexibility that I needed, and it wasn't fair to try to ask that of a station that needs a consistent face and brand. That being said, I still hope to refine and grow the skill set that you need to do well in TV, and see how I can implement and support different industries outside of TV in this season. So there's a learning curve to that, but it's also exciting because there are so many people where a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis in TV are novel to people outside of TV. So it's kind of cool to introduce people and they're like, whoa, it's like, yeah, like, common to us.
And I know what you mean. Because everybody outside of TV thinks it's a huge deal. They think it's a big deal.
Yes.
And I never felt like it was. I probably at some point thought oh yeah, I'm on TV. I host this show, or I do the morning news. And that's a cool feeling when people are like, really? But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but I wake up at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I read a bunch of doom and gloom all day.
There's a lifestyle to it. That's for sure.
There
but
is.
When you're in it, you don't really think much of it. Like, you put on your IFB, you put it on your mic, and you just do the same thing that you've done, every other day before. It's exciting though. Like, I remember my first
real quickly, because there's gonna be somebody say IFB. What is that? Well, see how I have AirPods, Apple AirPods, so I can hear what Grace is saying. Actually, as a matter of fact, I can see it right off camera. I have the same book bag that I would walk in with every single day into work, and it had my IFB, and it also had my cool little Blink 182 makeup bag. And and this morning, and I was getting getting the camera all set up, and I looked in the mirror. I'm like, Zach, you look like you died today. Like, you look like a walking zombie. I'm like, you know what? Why not?
So you got your concealer on?
No. I'll never forget too, when I first started in Lima, my first job. I remember walking into the Sephora at the Lima Mall, and I was like, I walked in there not flexing, but saying yeah, I'm the new morning news anchor, and yeah, I just need that stuff that you do this like this, like foundation. I'm like, sure, whatever that is, I need that.
That's like a humble flex.
that was my humble flex. Like, yeah, I'm a new morning news anchor. Can I get some makeup?
Hopefully they gave you the right shade.
No, they didn't. I walked in looking like Pee Wee Herman.
Oh no.
Super pale and
not what you need.
Not what I needed. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Look, I get it. You're a high-performing, successful executive or professional, yet you're dealing with a mind that's in chaos every day. Fear, worry, anxiety, stress, or maybe even catastrophizing over things that may or may not happen in the future. And this racing mind is keeping you from functioning at your peak during the day or sleeping well at night, and you're leaving everything on the table every month. I'm Coach Mike Basvik. I'm the founder and creator of the Anxiety-Free Executive Program, and every day of my life I spend it helping executives like you retrain, recondition their mind, bringing it to peak performance, the zone, in the flow state, every single day, while eliminating all of the patterns of worry, stress, anxiety, pressure, the things that are keeping you living in this hell every day. And here's what I have for you. I recently did a workshop, 5 days, 1 hour a day, virtual, and I'm making the recordings available to you. Why? Because I want to help you, because I don't want to see anybody in this world suffer, especially people like you that need to make a difference in this world. So I'm making these recordings available to you for free. All you have to do is click the button below, register, and they'll be in your inbox before you know it. And in these recordings, I'm going to teach you what the mind is, how the mind works, and how to bring your mind to peak efficiency, calm, clarity, creativity, passion, motivation, drive. You're going to feel better than you've ever felt, but you can never perform at your best until you get a mind that's working in conjunction, in harmony with the outcomes that you want in your life. And this 5-day workshop is going to give it to you. So click the button below, enjoy the recordings. I'll see you there.
Anyone who knows me knows that I love music, whether I'm shopping for my favorite artists all the way down to local bands. I come to one place, especially for all my vinyl, and that's Omega Music. And Alex, it's because you guys simply just know what you're doing.
Yeah, we've been around since 1983, family owned and operated here in the land of funk, Dayton, Ohio. We're now offering free shipping on all orders, $50 or more. All orders are packed meticulously with whiplash mailers. When you order from Omega Music, you can trust it's with care and with also people who love music.
There you go. And if you want to go ahead and start getting your vinyl on, there's a link down below. Go to omegamusicdayton.com. Again, just click that link down below. Would you like to promote your business on the show? We'd love to share your message so that you can make your impact on the world. To learn more, click the link down below or go to zachpitts.com/advertise. Now back to the show. What I do want to talk about is that huge accomplishment that you set out to do. You did it, and that's your book. So
Yeah.
did you start that while we were working together? I know that you had told me about it. You said that was a dream of yours, but I didn't know if you were in the midst of giraffes. Wait a sec. I do know the answer because I think you told me that you would send it off to either a publisher or you sent it off to, but you were so low key about it. You didn't you were so tight-lipped about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I'm like that. I'm like that.
You are.
Project. Well, I'm kind of like that in life. People say that to me often, but it is 100% true. Because I don't want to speak out something that I'm not actually going to follow through on, because I believe that our word is the best thing we've got. Like, if we go back on our word, what do we have left? And so when I put something out there, I'm absolutely going to do it, even if I've said it once. That's one why I'm very careful before speaking out what I say I'm going to do. But to answer your question, I wrote this entire book while I was in Dayton. So it was 2021, that fall. And I actually wrote it in a rather short time frame, but it was the revisions and the editing that takes forever. So with the publisher involved, they're great. They're wonderful to work with, but I decided to do a lot of the editing on my own, which I knew in full that was going to be a hard process. And it was. So it took 3 years in total after the revisions, reading your book over and over and over again, and then trying to find those oh, we need a comma here or an apostrophe here. Actually, no apostrophe there. And matching it to the Chicago Manual of Styles. There's so many steps to writing a book, but I'll be totally honest, Zach, when I wrote this book, I was putting it all out there, no filter, not trying to conceal any details of tough stuff in life. And some of the things that I was talking about, it was like a tell-all. I felt like I was writing a tell-all.
Spilling the tea. I think you posted about that a few times.
Yes.
Spilling the tea.
Oh.
Hey, real quickly, what's the name of the book? Did we say that?
It's called It's Okay, Finding Peace in Unexpected Places. And it really, when I joke around that it's a tell-all, fortunately and unfortunately, only for me, that's 100% true, but it's a tell-all of my heart and my story. There's a quote that I love by Morgan Harper Nichols, and it's, "Tell the story of the mountain you've climbed. It could become a page in someone else's survival guide." This is pretty much my survival guide. Yeah, my survival guide between two covers, because there have been so many seasons in my life when I've woken up with a blank page in my survival guide and truly not known how I was going to get through it. And so of all the seasons and stories that I've walked through in my life, for the days that I had a blank page in my survival guide, I captured that. I remembered it. I wrote it down. And this is my offering to the world of okay, this is how I got through it. If this could add a letter, a word, a phrase, maybe a paragraph, maybe a page to someone else's survival guide, then my work is done. And there's stories that kind of everyone's walked through. A breakup is how the book starts. So we've all walked through hard breakups. And it talks also, we talk about the Miss America experience. The headline coming home the day after Miss America for me was "Miss Illinois Falls Short." Not something you want to see after yes, it was your dream first before it was the community or the states. I know completely that I fell short, but that was not the way I would have ever phrased it for myself. Or talking about becoming a certified scuba diver as someone who's terrified of water. So many interesting random stories that pull concepts that we can all relate to and lean into. And my goal in this book is to put my arm around the reader and draw a circle around both of us to draw common ground between two people that maybe have nothing else in common. And to realize that we're all human, we all put on pants the same way, And we all wake up with maybe a hard set of cards in front of us, and we have to figure out how to play them and how to live life well and live this version of life well and not wait for things to change.
What was the hardest story in that book to tell?
Gosh, there were several that were hard. I would probably say, well, I'll tell you one thing. I haven't said this much, but so my husband asked if he's in the book, and I said no.
He hasn't read it?
So he just read it, but this was early, right when it was being published.
Okay.
He was like, am I in this book? And because I didn't want him to read it before. I'm the same way with him. I was keeping my mouth closed until I had a product to show for it. And I said, no, you're not in this book because you're not in this book until we're married. And this was published before we were married. And there's several stories that talk about walking through singleness and the dating season and how hard that can be. So for those that are in that season and kind of wading through like this thought of, am I good enough? Am I worthy to be loved? Like, there's a lot of stories that unpack that and understanding this idea of worth and what feeds into that and what takes away from that from our perspective, and finding a person that maybe doesn't necessarily add to your worth or make you complete, but instead just complements you. So I think some of the stories of the singleness, again, which there was a season of that I was walking through in my time in Dayton. And I was at a dark place. I would
While
say
you're in Dayton?
Yeah, I would say my knees it was like the start of COVID, like a lot of people. But I had just moved there. I knew you, I knew the people at work, but that was it. I was so isolated. Because, the roads were shut down and I was just in my apartment most of the day by myself. So I got myself a dog, which she's still my bestie, but,
hold on. Let me see if I can remember. Don't tell me.
Oh, come on, Zach.
Mosey.
Yes. I'm proud.
And the reason you named it is because she just moseys around, like you're moseying around the grocery store. She just moseys and right.
Okay. I took a picture of my Apple Watch. We made it 0.15 in distance of a mile in an hour and a half. So she teaches me a lot about life, though. There's a couple of stories about her of sometimes our desires are disguised in things that actually hurt us. So there's a lot of depth that runs with stories with Mosey. So we unpack a couple of those things. But yeah, I feel like I could talk just random stories a lot. But one of the hardest concepts that I think people will find a lot of my heart in this book are breakups. And so when my knees were on rock bottom, I'd say in Dayton, I was going to a church there because I was just trying to find people. I just needed like connection with people. And the pastor there at the time, she had said she lost like 3 close family members in the span of like 6 months. And I hadn't been in a season of like great loss in terms of losing a person, but I felt like I was grieving the life I had before moving. She said something that I still think about often, and it's so abstract and so deep, but I loved it and needed it more than I could have ever said then. And she said, "The darkness sings and blooms too." And I was like, what does that even mean? But I wrote it in all caps in my journal. And I just wanted to unpack what that meant. And I realized like I was in a really dark place at that time. But if I'm willing to sit in that and like let all my 5 senses, here's like the yogi in me coming out, also the faith person. If I were to let all my 5 senses like be grounded in where I'm at, acknowledge what I'm smelling, acknowledge what I'm seeing, acknowledge what I'm hearing, acknowledge what I'm feeling, and be completely in tune with where I'm at physically, emotionally, spiritually, maybe I'd still find that there's good here. Maybe I'd still find that like I want to wake up and live another day and live it well. Maybe I'd still find that there's a purpose to my story, even when I feel completely isolated from the rest of the world, like a lot of people did. So I challenged myself in that season to find the good when everything seems to be bad. And that's a posture that I'll learn and carry far outside that season. And luckily my knees aren't on rock bottom anymore. But I will take what I learn there well. I think there's this quote by Oswald Chambers that I love. It's not in my book anywhere, but he has some great books. And it talks about how we're actually not built for the mountaintop experiences. We're built for the valleys. The mountaintops are just a source of inspiration to get us through the next valley that we walk through, but we are built and made for the hard stuff and the tough stuff. And so I think about that often of like, yeah, life may not be like, rainbows and butterflies right now, but I'm actually not built for that. I'm meant like we're like sailboats, which this is something I talk about in my book too. Like we are like sailboats. We are meant for the winds and the waves. Like if we were to let ourselves live to our fullest potential, it's not going to be when everything's perfect. It's going to be when things are hard that we're actually going to find ourselves thriving.
That's so good. And who said that again? So tell me, what was that?
So Oswald
Oswald?
Chambers, yes, he
Okay.
he talked about the mountaintops.
That's so good. And it's so true,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you sharing that, Grace. I really do, because you and I worked together during the hardest time in the world.
Yeah, literally.
And it was really tough because your experience of that show, Living Dayton, was not what it was supposed to be, because the show was all light and fluffy and fun and tell me about your chili cook-off, your 5K, and then all that stuff. And you went to, these many people died from COVID. These many people are in the hospital. This is the number of this. And
Yeah.
so you basically came into a time where it was doom and gloom, terror, and just awfulness. And the one thing I always admired about you is you always had a smile on. And so that's why I'm grateful you're sharing that, because it was a tough time in so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And you're so right too. You're defined by the tough times in your life.
Yeah.
And, I often say, like, if you're going to go to the gym, right? Like, it doesn't feel good to like work out, but it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
That was a tough time. And I talked to you a little bit, I think, during that time. Like, that was a tough year for me as well. Like I was having issues at home, marital issues. And the thing is, you really don't know how things are going to turn out on the other side. All you can do is do your best.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've also admired about you, you're so self-reflective. And I think a lot of that comes from your parents. And you're a triplet. You're one of triplets, right?
Yes. Yeah. 30 seconds apart.
Yeah. Okay. 30 seconds apart. And I remember you would often talk about your parents, and they both came from, did they both come from entrepreneurial backgrounds?
Yeah. My dad, especially. And now my brothers are walking in that. Yeah.
And so you guys have that grit. Like, the thing is, it's like, I know that, I'm sure that your brothers are just like you in terms of like, they're going to make something happen. You may be struggling with something, but you're going to do it with a smile and you're going to get it done. Do you think that comes from your parents?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that we all definitely have that sense of like kind of this bring it on mindset. Like, I ran a marathon while I was in Dayton, and it ended up being virtual because of COVID. It got canceled 2 weeks before. The only reason I did it is because someone questioned if I could. And I was like, that is not a reason I'd recommend to run a marathon, because that motive will run out real quick, because running a marathon is extremely hard. And I was humbled by that, but
never have, never will.
I'm about to do my second one here in a few weeks.
Well, good for you. Way to brag. I'm kidding.
Again, someone didn't think I could do it. I was like, really? You think I can't do it again? I'll do it again. But no, we all have this sense of kind of competitiveness in us, but it's against ourselves, which is the best word of competitive nature, because it never runs out and there's always a place to grow. I think it's Tom Cruise who like does a movie, and every time he does a scene, he said, I could do better. Every time he does it. And he's Tom Cruise, legendary, he's iconic already. I feel like my family is bred the same way, where we really believe that every time we do something, even if it's probably the best time we've done it, we could do better. Although there were seasons in Dayton, especially in the COVID time, where it really did feel like I was wading through mud. Like, I was truly, every day just felt like I was walking through mud, and we were getting deeper and deeper every day. That's the part that is what makes us and shapes us, like the tough stuff. Like, that is the refining part that puts you in the fire. Like, that is your point of refinement. And I felt that, and I still point back a lot of the refinement that I had in my character and grit came from that season. But I love the word grit, because to have grit, you have to have something that made you that way. Like, a callus doesn't come from just like, it's not already there. Like, a callus comes from a blister first. And I think that's true with life. Like, you have to be hurt in a place, or have to be forced into maturity in a place in that season of refinement before you grow that grit and that toughness. And that comes through walking through tough stuff. And my family and I, like, we look tough stuff right in the eye, and it's like, let's go. Like, head to head, eye to eye, let's go. But that doesn't mean we're scared, like, not scared doing it. We do things scared. That is like a mantra of ours. Like, we don't care if we're scared. Like, we do it scared. My first like month at Dayton, I was terrified, like working for Living Dayton. You knew I never done TV.
That's right. That was your first gig, which
Yeah.
I remember. But the thing is, you had something going into it that most people don't have. I mean, not everybody can say they were a Miss America contestant. Not everybody can say that. Like I said, like I started in the middle of nowhere, Lima, Ohio. And so that was my education. Your education was being Miss Illinois, doing the Miss America thing. And a lot of it is when you work in television, you're being paid to be a personality. You're being paid to be a kind face, be informative, be credible, be that person that people can know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And that's why, going back to what we were saying earlier, that's why it's so important for businesses to do it, because if you show up on video, social media, and you're putting out valuable content, people can build that trust factor, that know, like, and trust factor. But I mean, you had it though. Like, the thing is, it's like with anything, you put in the work. When you first learned to tie your shoes, you weren't good at it.
Yeah.
You had to concentrate. And then now, like, you can have a conversation, chew bubble gum, and tie your shoes or whatever. Same thing when you're driving. The first time you learn to drive, you're like, okay, doing all the things. But now you subconsciously know how to get there. You're like, a whole 15 minutes could fly by. You'd be on the phone driving and you forget the whole drive. But that's what I'm sure, and I know this to be true because I've lived it and you have lived it too, but that's what being on camera is like.
Yeah, so true. It is. It really does become second nature. Like, you forget, especially when I started getting more true to lifestyle experiences at my next station, where it was an actual lifestyle show of not COVID, where we had guests regularly and we got to just sit and chat. Like, you forget the camera's on. But while I was at my second station, I was able to, they entrusted me with starting a podcast for the station that quickly became kind of my baby. But that is where I got to sit and talk with survivors from the Iranian hostage crisis, or Holocaust survivors, or a 17-year-old who lost her mom to cancer. Just talking to people and not giving them the timeline of TV that's like 3 minutes max, but instead saying, kind of, this is off the record, the camera's rolling, your mic's on, but I'm going to go back and edit this and make this into a story that does justice to you. And for the Iranian hostage crisis survivor, like, that was one of the first times he'd ever spoken out since the actual initial tour, when he came home from that experience. So getting to be entrusted with that role in TV is something I won't ever take for granted. And I see it as a privilege to this day. And getting to unpack an experience like that with someone who has gone through something so traumatic, and what so few have ever experienced, like, that is a very entrusted position. And I will never take that honor for granted. So although I felt like I forgot the camera was on, it seemed like by the end of the interview, and that was only, an hour and a half, which is still kind of long for a TV interview, but by the end he did too. And so I feel like our role as hosts has always been to make the person we're sitting across from feel completely comfortable and forget that the camera's on, the light's on, the mic's on. And that's where the true story comes out. And that's what I found in kind of that podcast setting, where we were able to kind of let the time go, and let them just tell their story that they've been waiting to tell, because we all have a story to tell. It's just not everyone has a place to tell it.
That truly is the skill. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When you're a host or you're a TV personality in general, and you're interviewing someone, that is the true skill that you need to learn, is how do I make you feel good? How do I make you feel comfortable sharing something intimate about yourself or something so personal? Because it's difficult, especially like in that 3 minute span that we were used to during when we hosted Living Dayton. And that's what I love about this, podcasting thing. And it's honestly therapeutic too. I don't know about you, but like, I love it because, I've had a few different interviews already. And what I like about it is you get some stuff off your chest. It's like, wow, I could never say this on TV. I wouldn't be allowed to, and it's a good feeling. But going back to what you were saying, it really is the number one goal whenever you're talking to somebody is how can we share this moment together? Mm-hmm. How can we have a conversation and be vulnerable with just between us, knowing that, yeah, other people are going to hear this, but the ultimate goal is, hey, let's be vulnerable, genuine, so someone can hear it and feel like it's okay to be themselves. And that was probably a huge part of you writing your book.
Yeah,
because you have done some incredible things, and you're not even 30 yet, right?
That's correct.
Right?
I'm not.
Right?
I'm not away.
And here I am. I'm 35 at the time of this recording. I feel like I'm like, shouldn't I be further along? But you did the Miss America thing, a talk show host. Now you're a baseball wife, which is awesome.
And more than that.
You've done, and more. Again, what I really have always admired about you is that you aren't afraid to let others know who you really are.
Yeah.
And that had to be a good feeling once that book finally hit the shelves. You finally got the finished copy back and said, okay, Grace, now it's just time to share it.
Okay,
what was that like?
That didn't go that way.
What?
When I first released this book, the morning after, I had like a full-on panic because I was
yeah?
My tell-all is out. And there's nothing I can do anymore. Did you
call anybody by name?
Yes.
You did.
But it was
you didn't give them. Oh, okay. So you didn't do like the Taylor Swift route where you because she never says what songs are about. I mean, her fans have figured it out.
Right.
But you didn't go that route. You're like, nope.
We had to keep it classy. And it really is like, if there is a negative story, there's good that comes out of it. Like, there's a lot of happy endings. There are like learning moments and plenty of those happy stories, and also maybe not as happy stories. But no, the morning after my book was released, I was in the car on the way to the gym, and I called my mom, and I was like, what did I just do? There is no going back now. Everything that I said is out. And I panicked a little. Like, I really did panic. And I wondered if there was a way that I could put a pause on selling the book. And that was obviously not an option. Like, it was out. It's scary, but that honestly reveals how, not exposing, but how I truly did not conceal the hard stuff, and the details, and some experiences that have made and shaped who I am, that were super uncomfortable during and in the experience. I didn't hide any details of those things. And so that's why I think I wasn't very excited when it first came out. I was just nervous. Because I'm sharing things that I have never spoken. And so it's nerve-wracking. You don't know how people are going to respond to your tell-all of your heart. And to have the audacity to think that, you know what, vulnerability is our most powerful tool that we have to offer. And vulnerability invites vulnerability. And if my vulnerability can impact one person, then my tell-all exposing who I am in my own heart is worth it. Especially if it adds a page or even a letter to someone else's survival guide, then I've done my job. Then my tell-all is out, and I hope that every person who needs it would grab it. And maybe you don't know you need it until you do. But for some people, like, I've also believed that there's seeds that are planted out of season. Like, you might read a story and it means nothing to you at the time, but then 5 years from now, something happens and you think back to that story. And as you know, like, I've always been a huge person in my faith. That is like truly who I am. That's my foundation. That's what drives everything that I do. That's what drives my thinking and the way that I act and treat people. But also I think resiliency in pursuit of my own purpose is driven by my faith. And I think Jesus in the Bible spoke in parables because they're like little stories that are easy to understand for the most part, and they're memorable. Like, we remember stories well. And so this book is written just like that, not like Jesus and not like the Bible, because I can't compare.
Talk about a humble flex. I wrote a book that's just like the Bible.
No, but I was inspired by the way he told stories, because that's how I remember things, is when they're told to me through stories. And there's this author that I love. His name's Bob Goff, and he's truly done an amazing job at telling a ton of stories in one book. And every time he just ties in this thread that goes through the whole book of like a lesson to be learned from it. And so this book has 90 stories in it. My book has 90 stories all kind of feeding back to the thread of learning how to posture ourselves to find peace in unexpected places when our knees are on rock bottom, and learning to rewire our minds to find good in those places, and to learn that even in discomfort, there's peace to be found, there's joy to be found, there's hope to be found, and there's purpose to be found. And so, yeah, there's a ton of stories, and I hope that people can just grab little pieces of them. And maybe if they can't right now, maybe 5 years from now, they'll remember the story that they read in that one book that they don't remember who I am, but maybe they remember the concept from it. And that's great. I mean, there's one story that I always laugh at in my book. It's about scuba diving, and plenty to grab from that. But then there's another story about a salad bar and the life lessons you have available to you at a salad bar, where like at a salad bar, like, yeah, you have the bacon bits on this side, you have the, the deviled eggs or whatever, the arugula, like you have plenty of good stuff on this side. But then on the other side where you can't reach, there are the candy pecans and the craisins and like all the stuff that's out of reach. But we're so focused on all that we can't reach, we aren't enjoying all that's right in front of us in this season. So I think that there's plenty of life lessons for us available. And in this book, I think I'm just challenging your mindset, as simple as a salad bar, of learning to find that exactly where your feet are is where you're supposed to be. And there's good here if we're willing to find it and look for it.
That is awesome. I love that analogy.
A salad bar?
Awesome. No, like, well, using the salad bar, but, trying to go for the things that are out of reach, not seeing the things that are right there in front of you.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot through this. So I guess that means I need to get your book. That's just what it means. And, despite, having some seasons where they're a little unfavorable, the one thing that, again, I've always admired about you, you can always, tell yourself you can do better.
Yeah.
And be hard on yourself. And that's something that I've always struggled with. And I think we've had short conversations when we work together. And, that's something that has always been my struggle, because I'll beat the hell out of myself all day long. I'll be nice to you, but behind closed doors, man, I'm saying like, Zach, you suck. You're awful. Why didn't you do that? And I do remember on my last day, we had those little cue cards, the living cue cards, and you wrote me a goodbye note on it. And the last thing you said, I remember you said, Zach, and always remember to be good to yourself, be kind to yourself.
Yes.
I never forgot it. It's probably in that book bag over there still. I don't know.
Aw. Well, I always, when I'm next to my friends and they're talking like mean to themselves, I will say that is something that I feel like I have gotten good at and better at over the years, is being nice to myself, because it's actually hard to do. And like I learned because I heard my friends being mean to themselves, speaking mean to themselves. And it's like, hey, be nice to my friend Zach, even if it's you that's saying it. Like, it's true though. Like, we are our harshest critic, but at the same time, like, we share a mind with our harshest critic, and we got to figure out how to do life and live life well, but also like happily. Like, we don't have time to be that mean to ourselves. And that exactly is going to be what slows us down too. Because if we have all these voices telling us we can't, all these opposing voices and forces, like, what is actually pushing us forward? Because it's really easy to come up with a million reasons why not to do something, or why we can't do something, or why we're not good enough to do something. But it takes one good reason to convince ourselves that we can. But we have to be our biggest advocate in that.
I love it. All right. Well, before we tell everybody where they can get the book, of course, we'll have a link for you below this video, down the show notes. If you're listening on a podcast, what's the biggest lesson that you want someone to walk away with if they hear this episode, watch this episode, and they'll remember it for the rest of the day? They'll remember it for the rest of the week. They'll remember it for the rest of the month, the rest of the year, the rest of their lives. What is it?
Okay. It's twofold. A huge reason that I wrote this book, and when I was speaking about the empty pages on the survival guide, was an encounter that I had with a young lady. I've done a lot of like work and volunteering at camps around the country, around the world, called Young Life. And Young Life is a non-denominational Christian outreach ministry specifically for high schoolers. But I was at a Young Life camp in British Columbia, Canada, and I was working on the outer dock, which is like half a mile away from camp. And usually people come to the dock as a destination with all their friends. And I had this one young lady who came by herself, and she went and sat in the corner of the dock. It's a beautiful setting, mountains, panorama of mountains, her feet hanging in the water. And we were in the Princess Louisa Inlet, 3 hours north of Vancouver. And each day she came and she sat in the same corner of the dock by herself and put her feet in the water, looking up at the mountains. And by about the third day, I was getting a little concerned. So I went and I sat next to her, introduced myself. We got talking, surface level stuff, just names, and that's about it. Next day, she's just on time, sat in the same place, feet in the water, looking up at the mountains. I sat next to her. This time we unpacked a little bit more. The next day, we unpacked a little bit more. And she began to unpack how she just didn't understand why she woke up every day. She didn't understand. She didn't want to be at home. People didn't want her at home, but people didn't want her there at the camp. And she didn't want to be there. So she didn't understand where in the world she was supposed to exist, and why she truly had a heartbeat. And that story and conversation is the one that I carry with me everywhere. Who is that? Who is the person in the corner of our dock? Whether it be the corner of our workplace, the corner of the coffee shop, the corner of our classroom, the corner of our kitchen table. We all have the ability and the responsibility to notice those that are sitting in the corners of our lives, struggling in silence, suffering in silence. And all they need is someone. Maybe there's sometimes a lot more power and presence than there are in words. And maybe all you need to do is go and sit next to them day after day until conversation starts. And at first they might try pushing you away, but if you just start the conversation like, how are you? What's it like to be you today? And just start understanding where they're at, I think our world will be a different place when we start posturing ourselves to impact people and realize that they may be staring at an empty page in their survival guide and they just don't know where to go or how they're going to get through another day. We have the ability and the responsibility to notice those people and tell the story of the mountain you've climbed, because it could become a page in their survival guide. So if anyone can take away anything, notice those people, ask how they're doing, and maybe add a page to their survival guide, because you never know in life when you might be that person who's just desperate for someone to notice them.
I love it. Grace, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to chat. And I truly believe you are making the world a better place. And whether you are striving to do it or not, but I knew when I met you that you are definitely a special person. And the fact that you went out, set out to put out this book, sharing so much about you, your stories, your experiences in hopes of helping someone else, that is truly remarkable. And I'm proud to call you my friend.
Thanks, Zach. Likewise, it's amazing what you're doing. You never stop. I will say, Zach just never stops. But it's always fun keeping up with what you're doing.
Yeah, likewise. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for watching, so much for listening. And we'll be sure to put a link to Grace's book down below. Make sure you get yourself a copy. Take care. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I really hope that you enjoyed the music that was underneath some of the segments in the show. And to be completely honest with you, as I was building things out, I didn't want to go through the whole mess of trying to find a bunch of royalty-free music so I could use it in the show. So I went ahead and I just used the instrumental tracks for my debut album, Midwest Romance, and I want to give you a signed copy of my album for absolutely free. All you have to do is help me cover the shipping and handling. Now, I totally get it. You can listen to the album on Spotify or Apple Music, any other streaming platform. But again, if you get the signed copy of the album, it's also going to come with some free goodies as well that you cannot get anywhere else. Again, a signed copy of my debut album, Midwest Romance. If you just help me cover the shipping, I will go ahead and send it right to you. Once again, thank you so much for watching this week's episode. Hope to see you next week right here on The Zach Pitt Show.